Cool. So we're here.
Wow.
Episode 1.
Yeah.
Episode 1. This has been a long time coming. Honestly stoked that we're here. Been kind of a hassle to get to this point, but you know, some pivots, but you know, it's fun for sure. So
I will say one thing. Making a podcast seems really easy on YouTube. The amount of technical shit that I had to learn in the last 3 weeks.
Quite a lot. Well, especially, I think a lot of people don't realize the video or not video, how much that changes your approach and what you need for a setup. Adding the video into it adds just a whole nother layer, multiple layers. It's strange.
Multiple layers, yeah. But overall, totally worth it. I'm excited to kind of just push out kind of like what we've been working on, and honestly, even more than that, right? Build some community. If anyone cares out there, which I'm sure there are people.
Which you know goes into what we're about, right? Liminal Discourse podcast. Great name, by the way. What drew you to that conclusion, that name?
Yeah, the name Liminal, to start off with Liminal, it's kind of like an in-between space. There's a lot of different takes on it. I think I like to kind of gravitate towards the more anthropological sort of take where, you know, you have your home and you have your place of work, and then you have that third sort of place. And the whole idea of Liminal is like, we're in this in-between space or this kind of alternative, non-traditional sort of area, right? And I think adding on the discourse piece to it, right? It kind of like sums it all together where we're in this sort of in-between state. And I think Boulder also is in such a need for one of those places, those non-traditional sort of third places that kind of get you in a place to just kind of relax and talk, right? And I think this podcast kind of is almost a glimpse at it, or it kind of winks and nods at it. But I think it ended up being a lot more than what we initially set out for, which we don't even know. I think this podcast has a lot of potential. I think looking at Reddit, right?
Oh my gosh.
So many people are weighing in constantly on socials about what they think about Boulder. Right. And I think we're kind of going into that next step where we're like, okay, we're creating this platform to kind of not just wink and nod, but really to talk about what that next step looks like.
Right. So it's safe to say that we want to create a space, some dialogue, conversation about, like you said, next step. What are some things that we can actually do to, you know, help in Boulder, as opposed to, you know, kind of adding to the echo chamber, right?
Yeah.
It's an interesting aspect to see that and see so much dialogue elsewhere, such as Reddit, or actually talking to people like face to face. And then kind of from there realizing like, whoa, it just keeps unfolding and unfolding. So yeah, this whole podcast is, you know, aimed at community engagement and trying to move forward with the next step, like you said.
Yeah. It's, I think it's important to kind of talk about where and how we really got to this point.
Yeah,
right.
For sure.
So I think the first episode, it cannot like be just jumped into without giving the context, really the background of how we got here.
Right.
And so I think that's what we're going to do today. We're just going to talk about how we came to this sort of conclusion. And I think it's definitely an agreeable one that there's something missing in Boulder, right? I think there's something missing post-COVID in a lot of places, but Boulder seems to be this place that really just sticks out. And
your journey, I guess, how'd you even end up here?
I think for the audience, why don't we tell them how we met?
Okay, that's fair. That's fair.
So I'm like,
yeah, okay.
I'm like, we're not just two random dudes
That is
interviewing
true.
each other.
That is true. Known each other for some time.
11 years.
Grew up in Southern California.
Yep.
Probably more than 11 years. Like
Actually, yeah, it's a lot more than
17 years, something
Whoa.
like that. Which
Why
is
do I
crazy
say
to
11?
say that.
I think I've been saying 11.
I think it's because we've
we're-
known each other since we were 11.
Yeah. I'm
Not friends at first.
I mix things sometimes.
I was a new kid to the block.
Yeah.
Not to get on a long story here, but essentially we've known each other for a long time, right? Always been friends throughout the years, gone our own ways. I mostly went into hospitality right after high school, just because I kind of bloomed into this social butterfly, and I just thoroughly enjoy community engagement and just bringing people together. I don't know what it is about. Like, I feed off of other people's energies,
Yeah, you do.
and I feel I strive to see the optimistic sides of things and bring people together in a positive manner. So I think hospitality and the restaurant industry was like a perfect scene for me in that. So going on 10 years now, doing that, and we've, parents, good friends, grew up right down the street from each other.
Yeah.
You went off, into the military, right?
Yeah. So I graduated high school a little bit late, but eventually got into the Marine Corps. I deployed. I like love my sort of military sort of background, right? I love that time that I was in, but I think the one thing that I really take from that is that it was so much about, like, when I look back, I get nostalgic about the clowns and not necessarily the circus, right?
Okay.
So I think it was my time to step out and venture off into the real world, I guess, right? Not that the military wasn't real enough, but I got out after 4 years. I had made sergeant. I was pretty much like looking around like, all right, we're in peacetime and I could do the same thing again for another 4, or I could get out and see what that's all about. And so I went into the next kind of stage of my life, which was executive protection, security, that whole world.
Right. That's kind of a common shift from military, right?
Yeah.
From military veterans.
Yeah.
It's like
There's
either that or like policing, right?
Yeah. There's not a whole lot of translatable jobs when you have a combat MLS. Right. And it's like, I was in a tracked vehicle. I was in an AAV, amphibious assault vehicle. And, you don't see those anywhere. So other than the military. So I was kind of lost I was like, man, what do I do? And luckily, I stumbled into security actually while I was in, but it definitely prepared me for when I got out. Realized I had a ton of soft skills that could be applied to different avenues, right. but really it was interesting. I was in LA for, I moved back to Ventura where we grew up, and I would commute to LA. Mm-hmm. And I'd commute, and half the time I was working with, I was working in rougher areas, dealing with, companies that would hire us, that we'd go basically, prevent theft, or we'd take the more serious cases, and it was rough, right? And so I was kind of like on that side. And then the other half, I was working for, really, really wealthy clients.
Executive protection. Right?
Yeah.
So you got to see a huge polarization of that industry, I guess.
And I think not even of the industry, I think the world, right? Like I had gone out, I had deployed, I had seen the world for kind of like what it was in certain areas, especially in the Pacific. And I came back home, and then I was introduced to the polarization of the wealth gap, right? I was like, holy crap, like these people are living in, such terrible sort of situations. And a lot of them were kind of forced to steal. Like, if somebody stole a sandwich, I'm not working for them anymore, so I don't really care, but I'd be like, steal another one, whatever. It was really the ones that were like just piling in, really capitalizing on sort of the laws or lack thereof in California. But, it was interesting because, I was like bouncing over to work for celebrity and work for, these really rich clients that just had so much. And I think that exposure really opened up my eyes. It also got me very much over my job.
Right.
And I was ready for something new. So I moved in 2021 to Boulder, Colorado. And I think that, you know, that story of how I got there, but really that like sort of that appeal to Boulder was so strong from such a far away distance. And I think that,
did you research Boulder at all? Or, 'cause
yeah.
you came out here with like your partner at that time, right?
Yeah. My girlfriend, ex-girlfriend now. So we actually had a pretty crazy sort of route here. We caught COVID either on the road or right when we got here, oh my gosh, it was a 21-hour drive, 2 separate cars, 1 dog. Right before that, you know, long story short, my apartment caught on fire. It wasn't my fault. It was the guy above me. All the water came down completely, just destroying a lot of our stuff, or at least, you know, definitely putting an interesting sort of start to our journey to Boulder. But
That's
it was
strange.
Yeah. And then we got COVID, so we were pretty much locked in, and it was the dead of summer. So it was just beautiful outside. And all we could do is just like, you know, look outside and go, wow, that looks really nice.
Right.
Seems like people are really enjoying themselves out there.
Yeah, crazy, right?
So 2 weeks go by, and, you know, we take my, her dog down to the park. And, man, I just remember it was so bright after being in, like, sort of COVID mode, right, for 2 weeks.
Isolation.
I was just like, wow. And I was taken back with how just absolutely gorgeous Boulder was. And we were at like Scott Carpenter Park, and we're walking around, and that sticks with me, right? Like that feeling, like that. And then like also I think I pulled up to a stop sign at one point, and somebody was like, good. And that's how I knew I was not in LA anymore.
Right.
Because somebody was like, no, go ahead. I was like, wow, usually we just cut each other off. It's kind of like this
dog eat
fight.
dog, for
yeah,
sure.
It's dog fight everywhere. It's so like tense.
Mm-hmm.
And when I got to Boulder, that was kind of like, I think for the first time since before the Marine Corps, I was able to almost like decompress. Right.
Right. Like feeling a sense of like true, whether it be like safety or comfort.
Yeah.
Just kind of like being able to like,
just breathe.
Yeah.
I didn't have to like turkey peek all the time. Like I was just like, as in like look over my shoulder. Right. And, it felt like, it was just right. And it felt good. It was like, finally I could just, it was weird.
Yeah. I mean, especially even with the subtleties, right? Whether or not you're looking or just being at the park, but then the background, you know, the backdrop, the whole Flatirons, just that summer air, right? Just beautiful. And two, coming from sea level, maybe even a subtle like feel of being like just almost high from the elevation.
I don't know about high, but definitely exhausted going up and down the stairs. I think it eventually I got over it, but man, what a cool, crazy transitional sort of phase in my life. And I think one thing to definitely talk about while I moved here was when I met Bijou. It was Bijou Thomas. He had this thing, like he had like a little get together every Monday.
Mm-hmm.
And it was meatless Mondays. It was like it was a way to basically take off the sort of the perishables that were going to go bad that were still good, but it was at the end, like the beginning of the week technically. And he was a chef, or is a chef. He's a well-known, respected chef actually in Boulder. I had no idea.
You just lived near him, or?
So we were over at an apartment complex that was like luxury apartment, right? Mm-hmm. It just felt kind of like, wow, this is really nice, and there's a Whole Foods right there, and I was like, all right, this is new, this is interesting. And I was met with a whole community that was kind of just there every Monday. And I think for the first couple that I wasn't really invited to yet because they didn't know me, it was like I looked down and I was like, wow, these people look like they're having a great time on a Monday. Who knew, right?
Intriguing.
And I walked past one of them. I didn't know, but she was really nice, and she actually was the one who was like, hey, are you new here? And I was like, yeah, like I didn't talk to my neighbors in California. Like we just kind of did our shit and went on with our day. And I knew nothing about any neighbors ever. So that was a first. And to do it, at an apartment complex. She was so nice. She got us basically told me and my girlfriend at the time. And she was like, why don't you come down on tomorrow? I think it was on a Sunday. So next day, Monday, we went down and we were just met with all these very, for one, successful people. Right. And I was taken back by, again, how unique is this? And I was like, that dude's really good at cooking. Had no idea he was like a famous chef. Right. But great food, even better people. And it was just a really good way to get to Boulder. Now, this is the part of the story where it starts to go in a different direction. Right.
Yeah.
I couldn't help myself, but noticed that there was just something off. Like I kept hearing the same conversations in bars about how the bars scene sucked. And I was in the bar. I was like, how crazy is that? Like I keep hearing this conversation.
Right.
And it, I think I gravitate towards entrepreneurial sort of,
engagement,
endeavors, whatever.
Sure.
Right. And so I started thinking about it and I was like, man, actually there isn't really that place. And I think being in Ventura, we all knew the place.
Right.
It could be different for other people.
Sure.
But generally speaking, everyone kind of had, a place to go to, right? It was like very much like upsold by the locals.
Right.
It was kind of like, you need to do this, right? There wasn't that here. And I felt like there was a void and I wanted to fill it.
Right.
The more and more I thought about it, the more obsessed I became. And I think I really just got into this mode of trying to first figure it out with, I think it was my sister that said, she was like, you want to do what? And I was like, I think I want to open a bar. And she was like, you're fucking crazy. You don't have any market research. And at the time I was like, I went to, I was going to JC at the time and I was in marketing and I thought I knew everything and I didn't. But that moment was another turning point for me because I was like, oh, I guess I don't know shit.
Right.
My sister, who I respect a crazy amount, told me I didn't know shit. And that to me, I was like, all right, then I'm going to know everything I fucking can.
You're the type to where it's like, if someone tells you can't do something, you don't know something, you're like, it's on.
It just, there's
just
a spark, right? And I needed that. And it was just so interesting because I was like, I don't know enough. I'm just inhaling data.
You're coming from California, military background, seeing this crazy polarization of just wealth and just people in general in the same vicinity, right? In the same general area, right? Have a calling to do something else with your life. You end up in Boulder and you just feel this kind of resonancy with comfortability and a sense of community, right? But now there's something that's kind of like revealing, I guess, or peeling back a layer as you start to get more comfortable in there. And realizing that
hitting that trough of despair of realizing that I didn't have, for one, the resources, but for two, the knowledge. And then as I kind of crept up that, from that sort of despair, I was starting to gather up more insights and more understanding of what actually was going on.
Right.
And realizing, even from business owners, they were telling me, don't start a business here. That's and I'm like, you have a business here. What the? And it was because of the operating cost, right? The taxes, all these different things that were culminating to make new entrant impossible.
Right. And two, a little bit of context. Like you said, you got COVID. So this is what, 2022 you came here?
Yeah.
So
21, end of 21, summer.
So it's still COVID, but starting to relax a little bit.
Yeah, starting to lighten up a little
chaos,
bit.
Yeah. Starting to get back a little bit more to normal.
Yeah.
But I think that's good context to add in relation to a bar in particular. I mean, any business, right? COVID changed the game.
Yeah.
as far as like hospitality and the service industry, it
Yeah.
really, really put a halt on things and kind of changed it. So
No, it's good. It's good context. I think there's a sort of lapse of time that I was in school. I was going to school. I went to school for 2 years out here, and
Right.
and I was about ready to transfer to CU, and I didn't. I dropped out. I dropped out because I wasn't learning, I think, at the pace I wanted to. I think it was also this obsession.
Right.
And
Well, and at the time too,
Yeah.
you were also culminating a lot of what would I mean, I guess for lack of better terms, like a phone book, right? Of either, I don't want to say powerful individuals, but settled in individuals that had a say, a substantial word, I guess, in the community, right?
Yeah.
And you're starting to learn more and more and get more engagement of people that have been here for a while or have some sort of vested interest, whether it be, you know, equity, business, or like owning some sort of home.
Yeah. I was getting a lot of insight from sort of the business and the workings of kind of honestly, it was vast. It was kind of all over the spectrum because I was fascinated with not just nightlife or lack thereof. I think it was really important for me to for one, I went to the Small Business Development Center entrepreneurship program thinking that was going to solve everything.
Right.
What it
Kinda
did,
jumpstart you.
I mean, it really gave me a ton of tools. Like I have a ton of respect for the Small Business Development Center. But in a place like Boulder, everything generally is like you could lose it so quickly, right? The business. If you're stressed out, especially from the operating costs, all the complaints that I kept hearing, I was like, man, this is kind of intense. Running a business is hard, and I know it is. I've been fair warned a million times. I get it. I've done hard. I've been there. And I don't mind that. I think when it starts to get into the more toxic side where it's like now it's not just hard, but you're protecting what you kind of got. And there's a lot of protectionism in Boulder. There's a lot of gatekeeping, especially in the hospitality scene.
Right.
And I feel like it's important to talk about that. Right.
Well, especially if you feel, I mean, it's one thing to feel something as someone who's not from here, right? A transplant. But then it's another to, walk around and not, and just really get a feel for things. And then you realize, or through talking to people or just overhearing conversations on top of your own personal feeling, it's like you would feel an obligation to want to dive further into that, right? Or you'd want to feel an obligation to maybe
I think it was
change.
Yeah, and that's the thing, it's change, right? Like it's this obtuse, like scary sort of juxtaposition to the traditional sort of the old way, right? And so as a new entrant, like I get it. It seems very disruptive, and it seems like, it's threatening in a way, right? But I'm like, I have no money. I have a limited amount of experience. All I want to do is be a sponge and soak up as much knowledge as I possibly can.
Right.
And I was more looking for any form of mentorship. And what I received was nothing. I mean, like when it came down to it in this particular sort of scene, there wasn't really anybody that actually took me under their wing. Maybe, I can come off a little bit rigid. I can come off a little bit abrasive, right? And that is very not Boulder in a sense. So like, I get it if I did come off like that, but like what it is that you can't get away from is somebody young trying to take on, something in your industry. Like there in any other part of the world, I feel like there would be a little bit more open-mindedness to that. And there just wasn't. I mean, flat out, I can say that there was a couple that come to mind, and they happen to be one of them is the bar owned by the youngest person in Boulder as far as bar ownership goes, and he was really cool, and he did help. I think it's such an arduous task. So you have the arduous sort of task of opening a bar, right? And the statistics are all going against you anyways.
Right.
But then on top of that, you have Boulder. Right. So the ecosystem, whatever. All I wanted to do was just be complimentary to Boulder, right? If there's a void, then there's a little gap. And I just wanted to fill that gap. I didn't want to, steal market share. Right. I just think that the market was fleeting. And so it's an interesting point, but we'll get to that. I think the bottom line was I was extremely disappointed for a while, just being real. And what that did was again, kind of like what happened with my sister. It just awoke this fire inside me that I was like, okay, fuck it. I'm going to outsource it. Right. And so through that, I met Chris, great podcaster, one of our advisors. He absolutely taught me so many of the ins and outs of the financial side,
and he
of the business.
Owns a bar, right?
He owned a bar when he was 22 years old.
Yeah, that's crazy.
He graduated from Purdue with hospitality management, and super credible guy. And he was like, dude, I think what you're talking about has legs. I mean, he's like, I think you're just talking to the wrong people.
Right.
And I was like,
And so it's interesting, kind of going back to the level of protectionism that you were saying, and a strange sort of there's an aspect of Boulder with kind of the ethos, dating back and just tapping into its history a little bit.
Yeah.
With that, the preservation mindset, which is not at all in any way I'm saying in a negative aspect. More so, I'm trying to tap in on the positive of it, right?
Yeah.
So the surrounding areas and trying to limit the carbon footprint and limit the urbanization, I guess you could say. We come from Southern California, and we come from somewhere that's surrounded by mountains and hills. Yeah. And there are plenty of places where it's like condos and multi-million-dollar houses just litter the hillside.
Yeah.
And, from the people living there, it's wonderful. You get these beautiful view of the beach and the islands and all this stuff. But it does, take away a bit from, the local aspect and the preservation aspect, right? And so it's I can't help to think if there's maybe some sort of
connection.
Some sort of connection. I don't know. Maybe we could talk about that later down the line in a different episode.
I'm sure there is.
Right. And in the sense of the hospitality in particular, right, and the service industry, and kind of the want for more vibrancy, but while still maintaining that level of preservation.
Yeah.
And it might seem that there are some conflicts that go in there, but I feel like with the amount of people that you've come across and talked to, and that we have come across and talked to, that truly believe that something like this could or should happen, in the sense of starting a bar, adding a new place, increasing the vibrancy, can be done without going against the kind of foundations of what we know as Boulder and the natural beauty of that exists, right?
Yeah. No, it's a really interesting point that maybe, the sort of like political sort of decisions were, they extend past just the sort of legalities around open space and preservation, and maybe that kind of infiltrates a little bit of the mindset of that, that sort of protectionism that we're speaking of. I think it's true. I think, to an extent, right, there's still a social contract that you have with like the next generation. And if you make it harder, you're not really passing on, you're not really doing your due diligence, I guess, as a generation, right? I think it's really important to note that it is a lot more expensive to be our age and try to just make it in Boulder. Right. Let alone the United States, right? On a more grand scheme. I think, it's, we could do this woe is me millennial thing, but I think at the end of the day, we want to invoke some some positive sort of change,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely. That's all centered around community, right? Which is
Yeah.
tying back into this whole podcast that we're doing in the first place, is to get community engagement. And I think there was a time in our journey on the bar aspect that really, like I was saying earlier, there's so many layers being peeled back as we're continually moving forward.
Yeah.
And realizing that, hey, at the end of the day, there is a schmoozing to the investors that you have to get for any sort of business, whether it be opening a bar or, the heavy tech centralized area. Like, you need investors, someone that doesn't come from money, right?
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, what is centered around everything that our concept is about, or that what we're trying to do, it's centered around community. Right.
Yeah.
And so using this type of platform to actually talk to those who would be, the people that we see every day, just, whether it be the average Joe or even like an established CEO, even anyone and everyone that just feels a part of this community, And it's interesting to say, too, that it's not to say that there isn't community out here. I mean, obviously, the fitness scene out here is incredible. It's like Boulder's known as one of the most fit cities
healthiest,
in the world.
One of the
most
in shape, I guess, like cities in the United States,
Right.
And probably the world. I mean, it's insane.
But with that even being said, there's almost a sense, there's like a paradox with that, with a lot of like the types of fitness communities out here. It almost seems like it kind of ends at fitness as far as your actual relations and social engagement, know, and that's where a place such as a bar, a third space, right, a home away from home, really taps into that idea of more than just your hobbies.
Yeah.
Right. True community engagement, true social engagement.
I just thought of something when you said that. I was like, man, I think Boulder takes a lot of pride in the preservation, right? But to an extent, like that's like to a degree, it is literally they take pride in something they did not do or they didn't cultivate. Like at the end of the day, like, nature is nature, right? As a city planner, what was your sort of, momentous sort of, thing that you did, right? In Boulder, it's that you didn't do something, right? That's your claim to fame, is you did not urbanize, or you did not. So when it comes to social infrastructure, you're giving credit to the thing that you didn't do.
Right. That's so funny. It's a weird, like, read between the lines type thing. It's almost like subtly hidden in this idea of being this kind of champion for the environment,
so funny.
Which is so paradoxical, right? It's so strange. It's so paradoxical because there is a good outcome.
Yeah. Oh, 100%.
Doing that, but
there's good intentions, and then there's great initiatives, and then there's also bad judgment,
unintentional consequences, right?
Yeah, it's the unintended consequences of your decisions. And when you preserve, right? You want to preserve. Well, there's something called time, right? Time doesn't fucking stop, right? You can't stop it. And what happens with time is people change. The sort of demand for different things tends to occur over time, right?
Yeah,
so
I mean, that's just with new generations,
and
new
it sounds like a no-brainer. But when it comes to the preservation mindset, that's something that's hard to grapple with.
Right.
The fact that the young people, the programming on the city side or whatever, like it doesn't resonate with the young people, and we had this trove of freaking young people that moved here.
CU Boulder alone, even outside of CU Boulder, just again, not to like generalization, but it is mostly, millennials, people within that 26, 27 to like 35-ish area.
Yeah, even I think it's 44 to
what's the
28 to 44.
What's the labeling that we always hate? It's young professional, right?
Yeah, which if you follow some of the programming in Boulder, there's a young professionals club. If you would like to go to that, sign yourself up. There's no link in my bio, but there is the whole thing with young professionals. It's like, I don't know if that's how like the marketing goes with a lot of if that's how it goes with a lot of places, that like you have to market to them in such a sort of like I don't know how to explain this. It's like the most generic form and very like straightforward marketing. It's like Boulder young professionals. And it's like, we don't know how to market to them. We don't know how to actually showcase value because we don't understand them or respect them.
And it's funny you say that too, because it's backing up just a little bit here. In the creation of this podcast, right? We realized there's so many different variables to this, and coming from trying to start a business, right?
Yeah.
The layers and layers and layers I kept getting folded back, and just more and more exposure to several different aspects that kind of play towards one overarching feel, right? With, you know, the new generation, right?
Yeah.
And tying that aspect into, you know, we're in the age of information, age of knowledge, right? Social media, you can have the news at the palm of your hand, right? Within an instant for anything that happens anywhere in the world, essentially. And so, you know, like you're saying, like, how do you market to the new, when you have such a concentration of wealth, and it's really, you know, older wealth, like older money, right?
Yeah.
And then you have this massive influx of the younger new generation, and there's really not a lot of commonality, and there's several different aspects that play into that lack of commonality.
Yeah.
Media outreach is so interesting, especially being that this is such a tech-centered place.
Right.
And so I just wanted to kind of like tap into that real quick as you were explaining about how to reach out to certain demographics, I guess you could say.
You know, I think when my sister told me that, right, you don't know shit about marketing or whatever. And I was like, man, I do. You know, I consider myself quite, you know, up to date on market research. Well, when I dove in, I was like, I was really invested because I was like, oh man, that must be the standard, right?
Right.
And then I met a restaurateur through a friend, and he was basically like, all right, what do you got? And I was like, here's this, here's that. I was like, I've developed these ICPs based on the data, the location enriched data, which, you know, basically says that everyone kind of belongs to these subcultures, and their purchasing power and their sort of purchasing behavior kind of falls into these segments that you could track.
Right.
Right. And so this isn't like totally new, like nuanced, crazy pseudoscience. It's actually like pretty standard. And I developed out these ICPs, and I was like, here's the customer journey. Like, this is where I think's missing. This is the pain point we solve. And he just stopped me, and he was like, yeah, you're good. He's like, you know more about marketing than like you think, like honestly, than like anyone here
in that industry in particular. Right.
And I was like, how is that possible? Because I'm hearing one thing, but it's true. When I actually got to, you know, take a look behind the curtain, it's true that they don't know who their customer is. They think they can set up shop on Pearl Street and have a concept that they probably, you know, thought about a long time ago that they wanted to do, and it fails. It goes under. Right. Because they think, oh, this is concentrated wealth.
I feel like someone that's been in hospitality for, like I said, right out of high school for like 10 years, that I wouldn't even say that is particular to Boulder or Pearl Street. Like that is, it sucks because it adds to the stigma of, from an investment standpoint, of bars and restaurants and the service industry, hospitality. But it is true to an extent. It's like there are plenty of times where you'll have either people that are retired, maybe at an early age, or come across some sort of money, and that feel like they have this cool idea, and then they start it and they realize it's way different than they think, and they kind of go in with very little, I guess you could say, and then it eventually fails. I mean, we saw that even on Ventura, prime real estate downtown. A couple ideas that they thought were gonna change, you know, be amazing, and well, I mean, we saw what was that one? It's like a self-pour service. It went under within like a
Yeah,
year.
yeah. I'm not gonna say the name, but
Right,
I know
right.
exactly what you're
Yeah.
talking about. Yeah,
Yeah,
it was almost sad. You know,
Right.
I think that's the thing about investing in these sort of hospitality ventures is like on a mom and pop level, especially if it's not a proven concept, you're almost, you know, all the statistics, all the things that are being constantly pushed about restaurants and bars
Right.
are mostly going against you.
Right.
And so you not only have to go against that, but you have also the other fact too, which is when you're in your high income earning years, right? That's when you're coming across money.
Right.
That is constantly being pushed back for our generation. So right at this point, I'd say that around 55 and up is usually, you know, those types of people are coming across enough money to actually do, you know, what they wanted to do for so long in the sort of scope of hospitality. And that's a, you know, it's an interesting thing, but it's also like kind of fascinating in the sense that like one generation to the next, very different, right? But millennials for the first time we have all the purchasing power. We love going out.
Right.
We don't want to sit at booths. I think it's like that simple, right? So it's like this, why isn't the normal way working? And why isn't this concept working with that? It's just this divide, right? And I think in Boulder, it's concentrated. It's compounding almost.
Oh, for sure. And not only COVID adding to that, but the tech industry, like I said, the social media industry, our generation being so driven, I guess you could say, in a certain aspect of the phone, right? And social media.
Yeah.
There's almost that subconscious yearning for like true human engagement.
Yeah.
And so it's interesting when you read statistics like that show with the purchasing power and the actual want for or the, I guess you could say what's the word I'm looking for?
Demand?
Not the demand or the capacity or gosh dang it. I'm
Sorry, we'll cut it in post.
We'll cut it in post. Basically reserving that little bit of money, even in sort of economic downturn, to still go out and spend money on experience, right? The experience economy.
The experience economy.
Yeah. And so it's interesting with that being relative to Boulder, with the amount of different variables that add to these ideas that we're talking about, right?
Yeah.
These lacking of vibrancy and experience, really.
Yeah. I mean, it's definitely, since I started this, right? Like, I remember looking on the first day that I heard that Deion Sanders was coming. I thought I was going to open a bar like very soon.
Mm-hmm.
So looking back, it's kind of hilarious, but I was like, oh man, I started doing the numbers on the economic impact of Deion, right? In no way did I think he was going to solve all the problems, but he was going to have a dramatic,
Oh, for sure. Huge name
on that uptick, right? On that bounce back, because I don't think people realize, but Boulder taxes are not flattening off like they should be.
Mm-hmm.
Huge effect because of COVID. You know, I think it's the preservation thing, right? You couldn't have predicted the black swan event of COVID. What are you going to do about it now, right? Now that you have this situation, this circumstance, right? What are you going to do about it?
Right.
And so far, it's interesting.
Well, it's interesting to what you said earlier too about the traditional way just isn't working anymore. You know, in this scene, right? Just always need to come back to like what the industry we're talking about, right? And there's this guy on LinkedIn that I like to follow. I forget his name, but he constantly posts about the old-fashioned way of restauranting and the service industry, and about, you know, it's really about taking care of not only your employees, but it's truly community driven and customer based. It's not about making a pretty penny as opposed to most other businesses. You know, obviously you still need to make money to thrive as a business. But
man, I was talking to somebody who is in the live entertainment sort of space.
Mm-hmm.
He was out of Boulder. We were actually at Startup Week, there I am at Startup Week as a, an entrepreneur, sort of hospitalian, sort of, going in that direction, completely like surrounded by tech, right?
Mm-hmm.
They're kind of like, what are you doing here? I'm like, no, but I'm really here because this energy is great.
Right.
And it was honestly like, the lean startup is a great approach to take on a very ancient, sort of industry, such as hospitality. And I remember talking to this guy who was, again, in the live entertainment sort of sector for a long time. And I said something about reciprocity.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a word that I think matters to our generation, and then it stops. Like when it to the next generation, I don't think it really makes a whole lot of sense. You ask them, what is the branding, like the ethos of a brand, like something that makes it's beyond just the logo, right? And so I think that really resonates with our generation, and I think there is a disconnect there. But from his point of view, he was like, it's a waste of fucking money. To do anything with reciprocity it's a gimmick. It doesn't sell. And he was giving me advice, like unsolicited advice, by the way, about how what I was talking about wasn't true. But the guy was stuck in his ways. He had sold his shit to a very big entertainment sort of industry, or they pretty much own the industry, but I'm not going to say who they are. Made a ton of money, moved out to Boulder. Now he's doing something else. But he left the industry, probably with a bad taste in his mouth and a big chunk of change in his pocket. The point is that the consumer changed. Mm-hmm. The consumer mindset is completely shifted, and that shit matters.
Oh, absolutely.
Reciprocity. It's the reason like why your employees are happy, right? And it's this like virtuous sort of cycle of price that you need to have in order. That's taking the extra step.
Oh, absolutely.
It's not screwing over.
Makes me think of
people and
makes me think of was it Arizona iced tea?
Yeah.
Saw a quick
like,
little interview of that guy. He's
sense.
like, yeah, I'm never gonna raise the price. Like we make plenty of money, and our customers love the fact that that's what we price it at. And it's like he thinks like, about the customer.
Yeah, he's like, it's units, man. We just sell more units. Like it's economy of scale. Like it doesn't. Even if it's the same, it doesn't matter because I think we've had this discussion before, and I love that you brought that up because it's like. Yeah, what's the difference between I don't know, a $21 old fashioned and a $14 old fashioned on Pearl Street, right? I don't know. It's usually not that much of a difference, but it's almost insulting to a point.
It's strange when you can walk 20 feet from one place to another and buy the same spirit for substantially less.
Yes.
It says so much about the operation that those two places are working at. And not to say that one is better than the other. It's just the realization of what you're getting and what you're actually spending your money on. Like what you're really putting your money towards. It's not in a lot of those places that have those really high priced cocktails, especially for something as simple and as classic as an old fashioned, you're paying for the atmosphere, you're paying for the experience, you're paying for even the I guess the visibility of even being there or the sort of putting yourself and the relation to you being the customer and actually being able to go to this place and saying like that is a place you go to, you're selling, it's more than just the spirit, right?
Yeah.
And especially knowing, margins of bars and spirits, it's insane what places can get away with in charging things. And it's very interesting because I've seen both ends. I've worked in dive bars and I've worked in fine dining restaurants. And so, it's a strange aspect, and there is a sweet spot. There really is, and that's that reciprocity that you're talking about.
Yeah.
You can have that customer experience that surrounds the drink or surrounds the goods sold that isn't at the expense of the customer as far as reciprocity, reoccurring, and you can cater to multiple demographics. You can cater to that demographic that likes that more upscale and wants to have that more finer experience, and then you could also tap into those who also want to enjoy that but don't necessarily have the money to go somewhere that's really, really upscale every weekend, and also doesn't want to be sardines in a can, sticky floors, college bar.
Yeah.
There is definitely a sweet spot. I
think
with that.
I think it's an interesting take. I think I just find it kind of out of touch, right? To think that the consumer is stupid. I mean, like that's what it comes down to, right? Like you're trying to pull one over their head, or you're trying to make the most profitable when you don't even realize the most profitable decision is the decision that is just taking care of your employees, taking care of the consumer. And then by the time that it gets, that you have like the problems initially, they become smaller problems, because a lot of the profitability now is almost like proven that if you have like a culture, right, around what you're doing, and the culture is built around giving a shit, right? Giving a shit about your consumer, right? Or the guest, right? Whatever, you want to call it, but it's the person walking into your doors that's about to go make a purchase and, into with your business. And then there's that one in the middle that always gets forgotten about, right? It's the employee.
Right.
And,
absolutely.
And I think if you have those checks, you have smaller problems. By the time that, it comes back to you as the owner, a lot of your shit's taken care of because your employees care, your customers come back. The whole thing about Pearl Street being so fascinating to me is that, like, why are the tourist traps the one that, like, why do they make so much? Why are they always successful?
Right.
It's because they can fuck over their customer,
right,
or give them subpar whatever, and it's fine because they probably won't come back. Who gives a
right.
shit?
Because there's always going to be that tourism sprawl.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think I'm like, oh, did I say that? My bad. And I think when it comes down to the restaurants and the bars that kind of made it through COVID that are around, I think those guys are like, they've made it this far a lot of the time. If they had enough capital to survive COVID, right? They've made it this far. They're looking at their K1s and their dividends. They don't give a shit about company culture.
Right.
And that's not everyone, by the way.
No, it's not.
There's some awesome people out there.
For sure.
There's some
and
awesome.
that's across the board too with a lot of places, and that's not particular to Boulder or Pearl Street. It's like business owners in this industry are carrying over, really in any industry, extreme debt from COVID, and that's we see that in a lot of development places that surround Boulder, or I guess that are just in the Front Range. A lot of like city development that kind of either fell through or got put on a lot of hold. And so with that being said, and when you're talking about community and talking about community engagement and reciprocity and actually giving a shit, right?
Yeah,
there are
just
things
giving a
to
shit.
take into consideration, which is what tripped me out the most, was like the whole thing about you that you said earlier about, wouldn't you be more open to new entrants or people that are wanting to come in to improve on the issue that is lingering from, of COVID, of that crazy economic time, just crazy time in general that we had. It's interesting to say the least. And then one other thing too, wanted to touch on the aspect of house parties.
I love house parties.
Love house parties, love throwing them, but there's a lot that goes into it. You're not only responsible for everyone that comes there.
Yeah.
You have to be respectable to your neighbors. Lots of things, right? And then
Lots of things.
Actually talking to other people that have been here for years, decades even, that have mentioned to us their own ways of their community engagement and the community that they've created by doing certain things like that. And it's funny because whenever we talk to those people, I've always been like, okay, I love that, but are you doing that because you want to have the exclusivity and the intimacy, or are you doing that because there's not really like other options.
Probably both.
You know? Yeah. And that's what I see. Probably both. And so I really saying that because of the, what you're saying. I don't want the listeners to get the idea that we're saying there's not community out here. There is such a
100%,
a beautiful community out here of people that do really care for one another, but there are definitely some dark sides of.
And I think as a proud sort of zillennial that I am, I'm like, let's talk about it.
Right.
But I think it has this like sort of way that it kind of comes off, especially when you're thinking about moving here. In order for us, right, to take responsibility, but really for us to kind of prevent this cyclic sort of distaste towards Boulder, a fucking fantastic place to live, right? It's beautiful. People are nice. I don't care what you say, because people are genuinely nicer than Los Angeles, California. I can guarantee it.
Absolutely.
And there's a spectrum of that. There's also shitty people everywhere, but
for sure. And there's even like an aspect to be argued about, diversity. Obviously it is predominantly whites, but one thing I love, and I mean, it is, it's like 87% white people, like Caucasian, right? But one thing I love, and being, still relatively younger, I guess you could say, but I not entirely resonating with the chaos that is the college scene, is I find some of the fucking coolest kids that come from so many different backgrounds that truly display that sense of like diverse commonality,
cultural sort of diversity. They're coming from different pockets all over the country, not just fucking the valley in California.
And it's not all of them. There's obviously a generalization. There's obviously a huge, there's wealth here a lot. There's a lot of big pockets. So it's not all of them. But
I mean,
I'm saying there is room for that diversity, which can increase the beauty that lies here with the people.
Can I piggyback off of that?
Yeah, of course.
So what's the one way to help increase diversity?
I don't know.
It's probably not old white rich people, but I can almost guarantee you that if you had more young people, if you made it possible, and now we're getting into so many different avenues for saying that, but I will say, if you think about it, like our generation en masse are not having any kids, right? Diversity is not really happening. If you look at the birth rate for Boulder, it's not good. More young people need to be able to plant their roots here, right? In order to do that, you need to make it accessible and possible.
Right.
More people, young people, will have kids. Young people are a lot more open to diversity than, people that can't do anything about it, which are old people, or, they've tied the knot a long time ago.
I think there's a weird
settled down.
There's a weird unintentional like idea that surrounds what you just said, and especially in the sense of like the preservation mindset that is Boulder. Because we talked about this the other day, and I love to add on to the fact that just because by saying you need the younger generation or younger people to come in doesn't mean to expand urbanization crazy. It's just the aspect that humans, we have a limited lifetime, and who is going to essentially, I don't like to say this word because it has a certain connotation, but take over or just more so fill the gap, I guess you could say, when the older folk, eventually like pass on. And it's not meant to be like morbid. It's just kind of the reality of it.
Yeah.
And I feel like saying that might.
Do you want me to say it just for what it is?
For a wrench, yeah.
Okay. 100% I agree. It's not like we're pushing for urbanization and we're like, trying to land grab, right?
Right.
It's not the case. It's just there has to be some sort of alternative or medium somewhere.
Right.
Because right now what they're doing is not working.
Right.
Right. And I think also if you have a discrepancy like we have right now, which is an aging population, you need young people to take care of old people.
Absolutely.
I don't know if that's.
It's not old people
I don't
taking
know
care
if
of
people
old
have connected those two dots, but
Yeah.
but you need young people to, especially, the infrastructure to actually house these older people.
Right.
As healthy as
Right.
all the boomers are, and as healthy as the next generation is. It's not ageist to say it's just
not at
straight
all.
up biology.
It's just reality.
And that happens, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Gravity is a bitch. And what that does to your body after so long, you're going to need help. And
Absolutely.
I really want, the possibility of young people to actually provide, because there's a lot of caring young people out
my
there
gosh,
that would
so
love to
many.
live here and actually help out when the time comes, right? Because I think the time has come, and it will just stay like that for however long.
Yeah, but there has to be that,
or maybe
that
just
accessibility to say the least, and not have it
unclog
be
the
so hard.
36. Maybe make it a little easier to get here. I don't know. It's
And definitely don't plant more tulips.
Yeah.
I was going to go into some Reddit comments, but we're running short on time here.
Why don't you tell them what we're going to be doing for
So
the next podcast?
what we're going to be
and
doing
so
for the
on.
next podcast and just podcasts, just the episodes to come. Basically everything that we've just been talking about over the past, maybe like 40
I have
minutes or
no
so.
idea.
I don't even know. We want to be able to talk about all these different aspects and variables openly and just raw to the general public, and and just get genuine community engagement.
There you go.
And part of that, which is wrapping the whole Reddit aspect into it, we want to tie in a Reddit segment, part of every one of our episodes, where we take comments from this chat room, essentially this platform of real people, and just talk about them openly. And because we don't want to give the notion that it's just us with these mindsets or thoughts. It's like, no,
Yeah.
this is very much so been gathered over time and comes from, sources, not just us thinking these things or just feeling like it's very much so centered around community engagement and wanting to open the door for a conversation and then take the step forward to do something about it.
Yeah.
So I think with that being said, we're gonna wrap it up here.
Yep.
Tune in
been
for the
fun.
next episode. It has been fun. If you guys like anything that we're talking about or just feel any sort of resonancy, please either subscribe.
There'll be a link
Yes.
in the show notes. If you're on Spotify or YouTube at this point, we're gonna have we haven't made it yet, but I guarantee you there will be a link down there, and it will direct you to a way to communicate with us. Give us some feedback, please. We're really thinking that there is a community out there. The one thing that really validates that is your feedback.
Absolutely. 100%. So with that, thank you guys. See you next time. Peace.
Later.